sprawy zapisati. So, well, welcome to my talk, called Learning Ukrainian Make a Difference, because I'm a very keen language learner, but I also think that we who love learning languages, we learn languages for many reasons. For instance, because we like a country, we like a culture, etc. But I think that we can also use our ability to learn languages, to learn the languages of people, who need our help, such as Ukrainian speakers at this time. So I'll tell you, just to make sure, can you see the question? Can you see here overview? Could somebody confirm that online?
Yes, yes.
Wonderful.
Yes, sure.
So I'll explain why I learned Ukrainian, how I learned it, and how, in my own experience,
if you put it in presentation mode, you might be able to see.
Ukrainian makes a difference. So I'll put this into a slideshow. Okay.
It might be better for the others. I don't know.
Okay, right. Yeah. Well, so I'll give you a short personal introduction. I work in the United Kingdom. I'm British and I grew up as a monolingual Anglophone. I'm a lecturer here at Lancaster University in chemical engineering, but I do research into biomedical engineering, more specifically into biomaterials, which are used in the sort of tissue regeneration. So you may wonder, well, why am I interested in languages? Why do I learn languages? Well, science is done in so many different countries, and I love working together with people from other countries in different languages. And in particular, I love the Slavic languages, which are not studied as much in Western Europe as Romance and Germanic languages. But I've had many collaborations with Russian colleagues, with Polish colleagues, and Czech colleagues. And my style of learning is very similar to that of John Profaci, who was just speaking. I like to butcher languages. So in order to learn a language well, you have to use it badly, and you have to use it often. Rather like learning to play a musical instrument. If you want to play it well, you have to practice every day and play and make lots of mistakes. Okay, and I stole the title for my talk from my buddy Carlos Lopez, the hyperpolyglot activist, who talks about how language learning can make an impact. And polyglots have experience in language learning. They can learn languages more quickly, so they can make a difference through sort of language learning. So why I started, well, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine started on the 24th of February. And I thought to myself, what can I do? I thought, well, there will almost certainly be lots of refugees. So one thing I can do better than most British people is sort of learn Slavic languages. I know Russian and Polish fluently, so I thought I can learn Ukrainian more quickly because Ukrainian is somewhere between Russian and Polish. And so in that way, I could indirectly show my support for Ukrainian culture, but also I thought people might need some help related to language, like translation. Maybe some refugees might come and they might need some help to talk to people. So it was quite a vague idea, but I thought, well, I'll start and see what happens. Now, this man, Richard Simcott, he's an amazing polyglot who speaks many languages, but he mentioned learning similar languages is more about learning the differences between them, rather than something that's fundamentally new. That was something that Steve Kaufman and John Profaci have mentioned today. And the magic of this is that you can almost learn a language almost naturally by absorbing it. To be honest, many people come to learning Ukrainian because they have learned a Slavic language before, very often Russian. So that means that we don't really need to sort of study it as if it was a very new language, but observe the language and then look at the differences and then learn the differences, so we're in a way, it's more about adapting what you already know than learning something completely new. As I mentioned, Ukrainian is a combination of, almost like a combination of Russian and Polish. And why my own philosophy to language learning, how would I learn, is, I mean, people are so different. There are so many ways to learn languages, so I hesitate to give people any concrete advice. I say, find out what works for you. So the only advice that I give would be to, repeat the advice of this man who said, the best method is the method you'll stick with. If you can make language learning a habit, there you go. Now, you need to have consistency, whatever method you use. And so I integrate a language into my everyday activities so I can practice it without having to find extra time to it. So learning Ukrainian is not something that I do especially separate to what I do every day, but rather I try to incorporate it into what I'm already doing. So I practice without almost having to organize my practice. So people talk about 4 skills in language learning: reading, listening, speaking, and writing. Now, there are many more skills in language learning than this, but these are the ones that people are familiar with. How do I speak? Well, Steve talked about talking to people in a more controlled context before you actually go to the country and start chatting to people you don't know. One platform that I use a lot is italki. I'm not saying that italki is better than other platforms, it's just the one that I use. And why it's easy to learn online with a teacher, I think anything that increases consistency in language learning is good, because that's the main challenge that many of us have, to do it consistently. And with these online learning platforms, you just click a button basically, and then your lesson can start. And so it's very easy to start. You don't have to go somewhere and meet somebody. So it's easy to use consistently. And to be honest, if you're learning Ukrainian, it's often cheaper than learning the Western European languages, because the teachers are generally not demanding as much money. So that's actually an extra incentive to learn. Regarding listening, I base most of my learning on listening, simply because it's very easy to do on a regular basis. If you think about the radio, a lot of people have the radio on all day. And if you have the radio on all day, then you're going to learn something for the radio, whether you try or not. So if I have some Ukrainian in the background when I'm washing the dishes, something that doesn't require much brain power, but when my body is occupied, but my mind is free, I can exploit that. And because Ukrainian has similarities to languages that I already know, I can sort of absorb the language. If I was learning a language that would be more dissimilar to ones I know, it would be more difficult, but it works for Ukrainian. So on the 24th of February, I thought, well, how can I start? Well, I went onto YouTube. YouTube is very easy to use consistently. And then I found some videos for Poles who wanted to learn some Ukrainian. And so here you can see the words and phrases in Ukrainian and Polish. And you can build the basic vocabulary naturally, but also you see what are the similarities and what are the differences. So here you can see on the left, you can see the similarities in Polish, jestem gotowy, and in Ukrainian, ja gotowy. Okay, same word for ready in both cases. On the sentence on the right, to bardzo interesujący temat. That's a very interesting sort of topic. On the top, це дуже цікава тема. So you can see the similarities between tema, the topic, and temat in Polish. But you can also see the differences. You can see bardzo in Polish, very is duże in Ukrainian, and that's actually like the Polish word dużo, which means much. And is interesujący, interesting, is in Polish is like the Ukrainian word ciekawa, which has similarities to the Czech word as a ciekawy, which means exciting. So also I started maybe not speaking from day one, but outputting from day one. So with writing. Now, my favorite workplace to butcher Ukrainian is on Twitter. Now, Twitter is very easy to use consistently. You know, it's designed to be for short messages, so people will use it every day. Many of us are addicted to our smartphones. I spend probably more time than I should, but if it's so easy to use your smartphone consistently, if you can't put it down, why not exploit that to learn languages consistently? So, and the other great thing is that smartphones have an autocorrect. So if you don't know really what a word is, if you start typing it in and guessing what it might be, the smartphone may suggest the correct word for you by autocorrect. So this makes it quicker, and it encourages consistency. Likewise, on Twitter, people tweet, but they don't tweet a lot. And it's much easier to read a tweet than to try to read a big long text. So while I was butchering Ukrainian on Twitter, I started to some more complicated sites. I like these sites where you can read and listen at the same time. So you can listen to what they're saying, but you can associate the words, you know, with you can match the sounds to the words. So here you have the subtitles of Всім привіт, вітаю вас в новому епізоді Easy Ukrainian. So that's very helpful. And then I started to look at YouTube sites for beginners. These are three that I used a lot. They're mainly intended for beginners, for people who don't know other Slavic languages, but there is some good material that intermediate learners can learn. I think that if you already know another Slavic language, you're not going to, the way in which you approach Ukrainian will be different. You're not really a beginner because a lot of the concepts and a lot of the words are not so foreign to you. And then in Word month 3, I went on to dialects. This is the side of my friend Marta Melnik, who teaches Ukrainian to polyglots, and these are at an intermediate level. And she speaks, you know, very clearly. It's very easy to understand her. So I would listen to this. And then after 5 months, I was able to understand material for school children in Ukrainian. Now, one good thing about the pandemic is that the amount of the amount of material that's available for education online, also in Ukrainian. And if you have an intermediate level of Ukrainian, you can understand these. And also the teachers, school teachers speak very clearly so that the children will understand them. And this is good for me because I understand it as well because they speak clearly. And then you have a more specialized vocabulary on different subjects. Now, I have an interest in biomedical engineering, so I saw these videos for connected with the digestive system, and this about the oral cavity and so on. And so why this was actually useful later was that I started another form of outputting, but in something that would help people. So there's a very nice non-governmental organization called Respond Crisis Translation. And what they do is they do translation of documents, for refugees or for other people in need. And so I volunteered as one of their translators from Ukrainian into English. I also translate from Russian into English. So I mainly did some medical documents which refugees require for treatment. Some refugees have complicated medical conditions like cancer, where it's important to know what treatment has happened before in order to provide good treatment afterwards. So by practicing Ukrainian, I was actually making a difference for them as well, which was nice. And also when refugees started to arrive, I went and chatted to some of these some people in groups set up for refugees. As somebody else who I know says, speaking their language makes such a difference to those arriving and visibly reduce their fear and anxiety. I think I talk to people, in Lancaster and the surroundings, and I try to help them with some general advice. Sometimes they don't have to. They can talk to me in Ukrainian if they wish. And also, I've learned a lot of Ukrainian by organizing these conferences about how to learn Ukrainian, how to help people by learning Ukrainian. And by actually connecting with people, thanks to organizing conferences, I ended up using the language more. So I was using the Ukrainian more consistently, so I improved. So we've had so far. I hope we will have a fifth one if there is sufficient interest. Also, I've been able to help with our university's collaboration with Ukraine. This is to show why the value of looking at the website of a university in its original language and not the English version. So here in the Ukrainian version, there's more information. You can see biotechnological and medical material science course, biotechniczne ta medyczne materiałoznawstwa. And therefore, I was able to click on that link and I was able to find out what happened in that area. And I was able then to make some contact with people at that university. If you only speak English and you look at the English version, you don't see this information. There's no course there. And if you click on the link, you receive an error message. Wybaczcie, danej stronki nie istnieje. Apologies, the page does not exist. So even if there is an English site somewhere, try if you can to go onto the site in the language of the country. Possibilities may appear that are not visible in English. So to conclude this, we are language learners and we can learn languages more quickly than the average person. So why not learn languages to make a difference? And if you remember nothing else, consider, if you're learning Ukrainian, to volunteer for an organization like Respond to Crisis Translation. There is a particular demand for people to help with translations from Ukrainian. And again, thanks to Derek for supporting the conference, my colleague, and Chris Coy for all the promotional material. And thank you, Dziękuję wam za podtrimku. Before I forget, I also wanted to mention the book of Ruth Darby, who I met via these conferences, that my big book of Ukrainian exercises designed, for people who have been learning on Duolingo. I must confess, I'm very old-fashioned. I've never using Duolingo, but I mean, this seems very, very, interesting and very, easy to follow. So, Ruth is here today. If you're interested, I would urge you to get into, contact with her. So, thank you for your attention. I'll stop sharing my screen now, and then we can have a sort of a question and answer session. Okay. So, are there any questions? Or not just to me, but Martin gave a very interesting presentation about Move Up. Are there any questions to him or to any of the other speakers today?
I'm just very impressed that everyone's doing all these things.
Right. Oh, well, thanks. I mean, and one thing I like to have these events is that people become aware of the other things that people are doing. Yes, my big book of Ukrainian exercises is not published yet, but I hope it will get Irina's seal of approval, very soon. Yes, there is, one thing about Ukrainian is I think there is a shortage of material for learning Ukrainian. I remember that there are books like Teach Yourself Ukrainian, which but I think that not everybody will respond equally well to the same resource. So I think the more resources that can be made for Ukrainian, the better. A question here: how do you deal with false friends of translation in Slavic languages? Well, the way I deal with them is that I just make them, and then people correct me when they don't understand me, and then I'm less likely to make it the next time. It's for some reason I tend to make the worst mistakes when I'm speaking Czech for some reason. So, for instance, I remember going into a restaurant in Jablonec nad Nisou, and the word for a smell, I said to everybody, "Oh, to je výborný zápach," and people looked. I meant to say that's a wonderful smell, but I had actually said that is a wonderful stink, because zapach in Czech is always negative, but in Russian and Polish, it is a neutral word. It can be good or bad as well. And I remember also, some of you may be familiar with a polyglot called Moses McCormick, who actually went to find immigrants in public places such as shopping malls to practice languages with them and make them happy by speaking their language. And I wanted to say that I said in Czech, and I said Moses McCormick szukał also imigrantu, but that actually means something quite different. But Moses McCormick, I'll just type his name in the chat. His videos are a very good illustration of how you can touch people by speaking their languages. I would say also on the question of mixing languages, that is one problem, okay, if you learn similar languages. But I think that the advantage you gain by learning a similar language and learning it much more quickly is much more advantageous than mixing a few words when you're speaking the language, okay? So, and actually, sometimes by looking at the subtle differences between words in Slavic languages or any language family is part of the beauty of language learning, in my opinion. One thing I would say specific to Ukrainian is that I mix a lot from Russian when I'm trying to speak Ukrainian, but luckily Ukrainians understand if I use a Russian word. Right. Are there any more questions for any of the speakers today? In that case, if not, maybe I can ask Martin a question if you are available. About Movap. You talked about making a version of Movap for immigrants from other countries, not expanding the idea from Ukrainians to other nationalities. What challenges do you expect if you were to adapt Movap for people from different linguistic families? I mean, a topic that has been repeated many times today is the fact that Slavic languages have similarities, firstly. So for a Czech learning Ukrainian or a Ukrainian learning Czech, the challenges are very different from, shall we say, a Ukrainian learning English or an English speaker learning Ukrainian as the first Slavic language. And also the fact that many people who learn Ukrainian will have learned also Russian in the past. So well, how do you see the future of Movap expanding to other languages apart from Ukrainian?
So yes, I expect that there will be challenges, like for example, until now we do not focus about the genders. We do not focus if the word is masculine or feminine, because the Czech and Ukrainian people will sense it for most of the times correctly. But if we try to teach English Ukrainian, then yeah, for English speakers, you definitely need to put in every word if this is masculine, feminine. So there may be such of these things that that we omit until now because we needed to be fast, we needed to make everything quick. But I believe that everything is possible. You need just time, just to concentrate what you are missing, and you can expand the database and rewrite everything. I believe that like for the first expansion is better if we start focusing on some foreigners in the Czech Republic, because then we already have one language. We already have Czech in our application. It's better than to start, for example, French Arabic language, because we do not have French, we do not have Arabic, and it might be a lot of difficulties. So I believe the first step is like to expand to these local languages, and then we try to connect to the organization that are helping refugees, and to see how like big how big need of our expanding is necessary, because there exist a lot of language applications that are specialized in some way. So we are still checking if we are in a right way, or if it's better that people will try to use something that already exists. So this is something that we still checking every time in every step.
Well, yes, I mean, you bring up a very interesting point. Well, several interesting points, but one of them was that you had to put together MOVAP, very quickly in response to an emergency. You also mentioned how we should ask, those who work with refugees in crisis situations for feedback about what they would need, and with a view to you developing solutions that can be prepared more quickly, and also that are better for use. I saw some. This is not you're approaching it from the point of view of apps, but one thing that I noticed when I saw books appearing for people to learn Ukrainian to talk with refugees, in my opinion, I don't mean to be disrespectful to anyone, but the books that were prepared, I was not impressed with them because I understand they had to be put together very quickly, but there was a lot that was missing from the point of view of language learning. So to give you an example, in Ukrainian, it's very important to have Steve Kaufman today talked about intonation. It's very important to show which syllable of a word is stressed. And then you had a lot of just individual words, but there was no indication of how they should be put together into a sentence. And then you had lots of words for, items, but not really much for how, can we put these phrases together in order to make, sort of sentences. So I know it's much more easily said than done. And it's easy for me to criticize, I understand. But what I would have liked to have seen was sort of a book which shows people how to build lots of simple sentences, and also which helps in sort of small talk. But if you want to have small talk, you have to use sentences. You can't just use individual words like speaking a pidgin language.
Yes. So, this what you have seen in the Czech Republic. This is the same. In the last years, there were published many books to the help to the Ukrainians and Czech people, and some were good, but some were really terrible. And maybe this is the problem with the paper, because you make something, you print it, and then it's published, and you cannot change it. That maybe. Yes. I work in a digital world, so we can make it quickly. Okay, there are mistakes, no problems. We will fix mistakes during time. Maybe that with the new technology, you can make the more agile work. Like in the old world, in the paper world, it's like in the classical type of thinking. You really need to make good preparation, good work, and publish, and nothing can be changed.
Yes. Sure. I mean, what this also shows is that preferably before a crisis occurs, people should be thinking about how we can put together something, whether a book or an app, in a quick manner, so that it can be published quickly and be useful. So I think that is probably a skill in itself. But how would you look at it, from the point of view of somebody designing an app? What do you think has to become better in app design if you have to, produce an app, very quickly? So if, you were trying to think ahead to maybe there may be another, I'm sure there will unfortunately be another crisis in the future. For the next crisis, how do you think, people should be approaching development of, digital learning aids for people in crisis?
Okay, so first is to be prepared. Maybe there some app still exist before and you do not need to make it. This is the best. We were discussing it if really start to move up, because there is, for example, Duolingo, but we knew that Duolingo will didn't open a new Czech Ukrainian course, and even the CEO of Duolingo told it that they will not opening new courses. So that was not the way, and we have already some Czech online website for Learn Czech, and for some reason I will not mention who made it. I will explain, because our Czech university make very perfect website for learning Czech, and it had worked for many years, but 2 years ago it disappeared. So my first examination was to contact the people, what happened, and then I didn't get clear response. I only understand that someone made a mistakes, and I don't show, like, the application was deleted by mistakes, was lost. I didn't understand, and I was, what? Like, our national heritage was lost, and something that I'm trying to force now, that we need to have open source, like, not only because the philosophy, but it open source, this cannot happen, because if one university has application, it has only this university, and if there is problem at the university and it lost the application, it completely lost. Like, this really happened. If this data exists like Wikipedia or like Linux or like this open source, then it cannot be lost, because many people have copies. So I know that there exists and must exist commercial software and non-open source software, but for the rapid help, for the help with the crisis, I believe that more important is that we have some open source applications, so that you do not need to start from the scratch. You can look at what make people in Germany, in Austria. You can take it and make your version. This is what we make in the MOVAP. Until now, only we in the Czech Republic are using it, but it's ready that anyone in the world, even without asking, can take it and can make their own copy for free and continue. So I believe this is, even if you are not fan of open software and this community, this, like, non-profit work for the rapid response, I believe the open source is very important principle.
Right. On that, anybody who wishes to contribute to the discussion, please feel free to write in the chat or unmute yourself. I have another question for you, Martin, but first I'll read out this question. Do you think it would be possible to study Ukrainian at bachelor and MA translating interpreting degree programs in European universities like English, Ukrainian, Italian, Ukrainian pairs, not only in Ukraine. Now, I'll provide several answers to this question, okay, because it's not simple. Firstly, I am not a language teacher. I'm actually a chemical engineer and a biomedical engineer. So the humanities are, in an academic sense, are so foreign to me. I don't know who is offering these types of courses in Ukrainian. In the United Kingdom, I am aware of at Oxford University, at Cambridge University, and I think there's a school of Slavonic studies in, I think it's part of University College London. There are 3 places where it's possible to study, Ukrainian as a in a higher education setting. But personally, I believe in learning languages outside the academic setting for the following reasons. Many people, language is something that is extremely interdisciplinary. So many people will be learning, Ukrainian for different reasons. Some, to help sort of Ukrainians now, some because they have an interest in the culture, some they may have Ukrainian, ancestors, or some people maybe have business interests and so on. So it's a very wide range of interests. However, I have the impression, correct me if I'm wrong, that language degrees in the United Kingdom are taught from a very humanities perspective, with a lot of emphasis on literature and, shall we say, arts and so on. It's a bit like studying English but in another language, and that's actually one reason I did briefly consider studying German at university. But then when I realized it would just be like studying my own language in another language, like studying with literature, and that didn't appeal to me, so I gave that up. So there are many people who are very interested in language, but don't want to learn it through this academic humanities-based route. And actually, do you know Luca Lampariello? He's a brilliant, very famous polyglot from Rome. He's actually an electrical engineer. And he did not, if I'm not mistaken, he didn't come from languages from this sort of traditional academic languages path. He came from a different route. So to answer your question, I'm trying to say that, well, firstly, I don't know, but I do know that it's possible to study Ukrainian at some places in the UK as a subject, but I don't think that's the way in which we should be trying to promote Ukrainian language learning in the United Kingdom. If you want to start up encourage people to learn Ukrainian in this country, you don't encourage them to go to study Ukrainian at university. You would try to find a way for them to sort of integrate it into their lives so that they will use it and so it will enrich their lives. I would love to see more Ukrainian being learned at my university, but in order also, higher education is also a business. You have to have enough students to come and pay fees for a higher education institution to consider that. So I think, and that isn't going to happen soon. I think I know many people want to learn Ukrainian, but not many want to learn it as a university subject. One question: do you have now practice to speak common Ukrainian, and where? It's to me, yes. I mean, I have, I've come into contact, with Ukrainians via my work, in my research. My university is starting a collaboration with the Dnipro Polytechnic, and I try to help with that as well. I also, I'm in contact with some Ukrainians here in Lancashire, and I talk to them as well. And then also I I sort of listen to Ukrainian media to practice as well. So yeah, so by making Ukrainian part of my life, I automatically sort of practice it without having to make an extra effort to practice it, if you understand what I mean. Yeah. Yes. Actually, if I may ask a question to everybody, one thing that I think is I haven't seen yet is a resource to help people learn languages specifically to help, refugees. And ideally, such a resource would enable quick learning to a sort of conversational sort of, level. I don't know if such a thing exists, or if when I've looked on YouTube, you see lots of videos such as learn Ukrainian, learn Arabic, learn Turkish, or whatever, but you don't see a lot of learn I don't know, learn Arabic from Syria to help Syrian refugees, for instance. Do any of you have any experience with such resources? I mean, I hope that as a result of this war in Ukraine, people will start to think about making these sort of resources specifically for people who want to learn a language to help refugees. And it also makes me wonder, because there are so many asylum seekers come to Western European countries, has anyone prepared a resource to help the people who work with the local people who work with asylum seekers and refugees to learn their languages?
Good question.
I mean, people will make, resources for, business English or business German or whatever, but you don't see a lot of resources like, refugee German or refugee Arabic or refugee Ukrainian. And to answer another question, have you been in Ukraine? No, I've never been to Ukraine. So, and also there's there is a situation that occurs, I think, most of all with English, in that there are many people who have learned English to a high level, but have never had or have had limited contact with Anglophone cultures. So do you remember, Natalia was giving her talk earlier about the differences between the way in which British people would speak English and the way a Ukrainian might speak English? Well, that's actually a much wider issue. Many, as we speak, you will have people who have learned English as a second language talking to each other, but they're not really speaking the English that Anglophones speak. They're speaking their own languages translated into English without the culture of Anglophones. Okay, so in a way that shows that English is being sort of divorced from the culture of its native speakers. Now, you might think, why am I mentioning all this? Now, because I have actually the same feeling with sort of Ukraine in a way, because I've never been to this country, and my experience with although I do speak to Ukrainians, okay, in fact, 99% of my interactions in Ukrainian are with Ukrainians. I still have never been to their country, so I don't know what it's like there. There are many aspects of the culture that people talked about today that I was unaware of before. So but although I still feel this shall we say this gap between the fact that I can have a conversation in Ukrainian, I can use the language, but I'm not familiar with the country. There's a hand up. Please unmute yourself and speak.
Hello, my name is Natalie. I just
Yes.
wanted to answer your question, probably not completely relevant to app for refugees. As a translator, I'm working for one German company, translating from German into Italian. And this company is just working on platform, on app, and has learning platform, Moodle platform, especially for those coming to German-speaking countries from different countries as workers and also as refugees. And also for Ukrainian refugees, there is a tool to help people to integrate soon into society, help them to work, to find work sooner, as soon as possible. That's it. If you want, I will share the information.
Sure, that's great. I think the type of app that you're talking is to help the refugees integrate into the society that accepts them. To be clear, I'm thinking more of language learning resources to help the local people speak the language of the refugees. I noticed here in the chat, Ukrainian phrasebook for helping refugees by Anna Ohoiko, available since summer 2022. Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. I'm curious about it. But yes, is there any somebody else has their hand up? Right. Are there any more? Would anyone like to add anything else? Okay. Well, in that case, I'll say, thank you very much for coming. This is a conference about learning Ukrainian, so I'll finish in Ukrainian. Дуже вам дякую за участь. Мені дуже сподобалася дискусія. Я купу нових речей про Україну і про українську мову сьогодні навчив. Я завжди, коли я організую такі заходи, я усвідомлюсь, що вивчення мов зв'язані з багатьма інших справами, пов'язаними з культурою, з політикою, з всіми. Добре, я пишу вам мейл з анкетою, і я з нетерпінням чекаю на ваші підгуки. So I'm looking forward to receiving your feedback, and thank you again. You can't have a conference without speakers and without participants. So thanks. I will stop the recording now. Ja zakінчу записування.